Hey everybody, this is Brandon, aka Don Locks MMA, coming to you with the UFC 80 post-weigh-in analysis. This video is presented by Chesco Sports, your one-stop shop for sports betting content. And if you haven't already, make sure to leave us a like and a follow. I'm here to team up with the MMA Minute and Chesco Sports YouTube channel to present a video on Fridays where I break down the weigh-ins and the face-offs to see if anyone had a bad cut and how that might affect their performance on Saturday from a betting perspective. So on the right-hand side, we're going to have the face-offs rolling to see how each of these fighters matched up against each other and sized up. First fight of the night, we got Montana De La Rosa versus JJ Aldrich. I think these two women sized up pretty well against each other. They're both pretty high-level women fighters and have been in the UFC for a long time. I'm going to pause the video real quick to analyze. I think JJ has a slight size disadvantage here. But overall, De La Rosa's past losses are to top-level competition like Tatiana Suarez, Bueno Silva, Macy Barber, and she recently beat Ariana Lipski. I think it was 3 fights back. And Aldrich lost to Lipski pretty recently, and it was a pretty handed loss. Lipski beat her pillar to post that entire fight, and she also lost to Erin Blanchfield, but had a bounce-back win recently. I think that De La Rosa might have a wrestling edge here, but overall it's going to be a really close fight as it's very closely lined, and I don't really have any read from the weigh-in or the face-off. The next fight of the night, we have Aoriqileng versus Johnny Munoz. Johnny Munoz looked a little bit shaky on the scale as he was off balance and walking pretty slow, but overall a fine cut, not too worried about it. And Aoriqileng looked fine as well. Both these guys usually do make weight. I think the read here is that Munoz wins against a horrible level of competitions like Jamie Simmons and Ludovic Shalinian, but he clearly folds under pressure when he's against UFC caliber guys. I'm going to pause here to analyze the size of each of these guys. I think Aoriqileng has a slight size advantage here, but I don't think that his fighting style really favors that at all. I don't think he really fights behind his jab or uses his reach. He's kind of a brawler in there. And Munoz, as we know, is a jiu-jitsu guy. Long also faced his first KO loss pretty recently, coming in, I think it was 14 seconds. And that was in June, which is a little concerning to see him come back so soon. But overall, both these fighters weighed in fine, and I don't see any reads from it as well. Next fight of the night, we got Vanessa Demopoulos versus Murata. Vanessa looked great on the scale. She had a big smile, full of energy. And Murata was locked in, very serious, but it was an overall normal cut. I'm going to pause here to analyze the size difference. If anything, I think Demopoulos might have a slight size advantage, but Murata's pretty stocky and thick and has a really strong wrestling base. So I don't think either is going to be overpowering each other too much. Murata's been off for 3 years, and her last fight, she literally got her arm ripped off. And that's a concern against Vanessa's tricky guard game because she's very flexible and she has a very slippery guard as well as good arm bars. And Murata's the better wrestler here, but at minus 400, that's a really scary line to play. But overall, from the weigh-in and the face-off, no extra read here. Next fight of the night, we have Nate Maness versus Mendonca out of Shoot the Box. Overall, Maness is a gigantic flyweight. He has to cut a lot of weight to make this 125 limit, and that definitely showed on the scales as his face and jaw were very sucked in. And that does worry me against someone who would potentially push a pace like the Shoot the Box guys in Mendonca. I think that Mendonca looked pretty solid against Basharat, and Basharat's one of the best prospects in the entire UFC. So I kind of see that Mendonca might come out and finish him early, but overall Maness a little bit taller, and that's my read on the on his weigh-in. For the next fight of the night, we have Diana Belbita versus Karolina Kowalkiewicz. I'm going to pause right here because I want to talk about Belbita's weigh-in. Honestly look great on the scales, and I see a really big size advantage here. It may not look like it in the photo, but I already see a couple of inches of height difference in Belbita, and she's wearing flip-flops while Karolina is wearing shoes. And that's something that you always have to note in these videos and looking into it. I think that Belbita will be the better striker here. Obviously, Karolina is much more experienced, faced a better level of competition, But I see a lot of people betting Carolina, and I'm not sure about it just because I don't think she's on the right trajectory of her career. And Belbita's still pretty green in the sport. I see a big size difference here, and she had a great weigh-in. Carolina had a fine weigh-in herself. But overall, if who won this face-off, it was definitely Belbita. And at the end, you can see them embrace and do a little peace sign. So it's always nice to see people be friends on the scales, unless it's a really intense face-off. We like the complete opposite. Next, we have Jan Cutelaba versus Felipe Lins. Both these guys looked amazing on the scale, I thought. And as they size up, pretty similar height, but Lins coming down from heavyweight is a really, really thick light heavyweight. He's got a ginormous frame, and I'm not sure that Jan's going to be able to bully him in there like he does with a lot of his opponents. Overall, really intense face-off. Jan always doing his little tips and tricks to try to intimidate his opponent. It's going to be a great scrap, and I think this is pretty much a coin flip. Next fight of the night, we have Algeo versus Hernandez. This is one I definitely want to talk extensively about. So I'm going to let you guys watch the weigh-in yourself. I'm going to pause and talk for a little bit. To give some brief background here, Hernandez has primarily been a guy I've always been looking to fade from a betting perspective. But I was honestly really impressed with his cut to 45. It's a full camp this time. He went out there and fought Jim Miller last time out on short notice and came through in the third round with much improved cardio. And I really like what I see in this cut, and especially in his interview with his mindset change. He said he's been coming through some personal ruts, and he finally feels like he's at a good place. And he really looks like it on the scale. This big of a fighter with this much muscle coming down to 45 usually isn't the best idea, but I think he's handled his cut really well. He looks full of energy up there, and Algeo is a professional. He's been at this for a while, and he always cuts weight pretty well. He's naturally a big featherweight as well. Algeo's got the size advantage being taller, but Hernandez is one large man with really, really long arms. This is going to be an absolute scrap. It's going to be my fight of the night, I think. And overall, I think Hernandez looked great on the scale, and I think that's something to note as someone who usually gasses out in the first round. So I think it might not be the case this time. Next fight of the night, we have Drew Dober going against Aoriqileng. And Drew Dober is one huge, huge lightweight, and he's been making these cuts look horrible every single time out. But I try not to read too much into it because he looked horrible on the scales against Rafael Alves and still knocked that guy out. But I think that Aoriqileng actually has the size advantage here. As you can see, he's a little bit taller. And Dober has been walking a little gingerly all week. And, when he weighs in, he looks like the Crimson Chin. He's got the face sucked in and everything. Overall, Dober's chin might have got cracked for good last time against Frivola. Like, I would not be betting on him as a minus 400 favorite, even considering it in this fight. So I think this is a stay away because Aoriqileng also suffered a KO loss against Christos Giagos, which is not a great look at all. And this next fight here, we have Buckley versus Alex Morono. I'm actually going to let these guys get face-to-face and then pause to talk for a while here because I thought this was the probably biggest read of the weigh-in itself. Morono is a longtime veteran of the game, and cutting down is not easy for him nowadays. On the actual weigh-in show, not the face-off show, he was seen with his hands on his knees, heavy breathing, almost fainting before weighing in. And this is a sign of him kind of getting older and not being able to cut the weight well. And against Ponzinibbio, he kind of gassed out in the third round, and I think that might happen here, as I was originally looking to fade Buckley at the minus 170 number, just because Buckley is also pretty chinny, and he didn't look that great against Fialho before the KO. Morono has a bit of a size advantage here, being a little bit taller, but his weight cut was absolutely horrible and something to note when you're betting on him because he might have that chin cracked as it was a horrible cut and it was really hard on his body. Next fight of the night, we have Joe Pyfer versus Alhassan. Joe Pyfer is quite literally one of the biggest middleweights in the entire division, and he doesn't look like he's struggling at all when he's cutting weight, which is pretty surprising. Alhassan looked great as well. He is also a very, very big middleweight. He's wearing flip-flops here, and Joe's wearing shoes, so the size difference is a little bit exaggerated, but Joe Pyfer is definitely the bigger side here. Joe Pyfer is a really interesting prospect because he's looked great knocking out a pretty low level of competition. So I'm really interested to see what he does against Alhassan, who has crazy power on the feet. Overall, both look solid in the weigh-ins and no extra read here for sure. And then in our final fight of the night, we have Grant Dawson versus Bobby Green. Grant Dawson, I was definitely looking at his cut pretty intensely because he has gassed out in the past against Aoriqileng. And overall, I thought he looked amazing on the scale. He had a lot of energy, and he definitely looks like he's in great shape for this 5-round fight. And I'm really interested to see if the wrestling works against Bobby Green. I'm going to pause it here just to analyze for a second. As you can see here, there's some words being exchanged about Bobby asking if he's going to strike with him like he did it on a video online. Basically mocking Bobby Green and saying that he would be able to strike with him on the feet, which is not true. Dawson's going to use his wrestling here, take down Bobby Green, but I'm a huge Bobby Green fan, and I hope he stuffs the takedown and knocks Grant Dawson out late. But if he doesn't stuff those takedowns, it's going to be a long night for him. But overall, it's a flawless weigh-in session. Everybody made weight, and it's going to come down to who shows up on Saturday night. And that's it for the UFC 80 post-weigh-in analysis show. If you want access to the MMA Minutes and Chesco Sports Premium Betting Guide for the card, check out the Patreon, and the link's in the description.